welcome to the Marine FC official podcast. Now we've got another special guest for this evening's podcast. It's a man who's been affiliated or associated with Marine for a long time, since he was a child, and he's gone on to write for The Athletic, a very popular writer now. So welcome on to Simon Hughes. How's it going? You okay?
Thanks very much, Tom. Yeah, very, very kind description.
Oh, no problem at all. It's a pleasure to have you on. Obviously, we've had a few people on from the Spurs side of things after the big game, and it's good to have you on as well. Obviously, for people who don't know, Simon was invited to follow with the team in the lead up to the Spurs game. In the week of the Spurs game, he was pretty much with the team all the time, through the training sessions, through the hotel in the evening before, when we had a pint together, which was a privilege, and it was really good. And obviously you're going to give us some insight on that. But yeah, just to start in general, you're a big Liverpool fan, and you tend to cover Liverpool quite a lot for the Athletic. So big win in the Champions League last night. Is it back to winning ways for the Reds, do you think?
I don't want to speak too soon. Yeah, it was a lot more positive for reasons with foundation, I think, in the sense that, you know, you've seen Fabinho going back in the middle of midfield, and I think that just gave the defence a lot more protection, and seeing players play in the sort of natural positions, I think that should be a source of some encouragement. I think that, you know, all the problems, you know, I could go on for that, you know, for quite a while, I think, about what's happened this season, but I just think that fundamentally, if you can get players playing in the positions that they're most comfortable in, you've got a better chance. And I mean, I would hope that for the rest of the season, you know, you'll see the two centre halves playing who played if Van Dijk doesn't come back, and the midfield's in a more balanced shape as it was. And I think from there you've got more of a chance, haven't you? It's as simple as that, really. Too much chopping and changing this season for a variety of reasons, and I think that's had an effect on the structure of the team and the confidence as well. And obviously when you've got bad results thrown into that, it's just it's been a difficult period. But yeah, you just never know with Liverpool. You've sort of been through these periods before where they've seemingly sort of let the season sort of slide away, but then end up sort of picking up the last sort of, particularly in Europe. So yeah, I think that seems like the best route now towards Champions League football next season. So they really need that for a number of reasons. So fingers crossed they'll get on a bit of a run now, because they haven't won a series of games for quite a while. So I think that's what they need, just to get the confidence back a bit.
Yeah, as you say, some consistency going, kind of get Fabinho back in that midfield, get that centre-back pairing playing together, really, because there's a crazy amount of partnerships. It's like 16 centre-back partnerships this season or something. So if you could get some consistency going there.
On to 20 now.
20.
On to 20, which is just insane when you think about it. I mean, a lot of people are looking for all sorts of reasons why it's been the way it is, but sometimes it's just right in front of you, isn't it? You know, like when you put it like that, you know, your defence is meant to be the foundation of everything, really, of everything you're doing. Yeah. I mean, you could strip it back to Marine, couldn't you? You look at why they've had the success, I think, over the last, or had the success in the FA Cup this season, we're doing well in league. It's based on a strong defence, isn't it? The back four and the goalkeeper never changed, really. I think when you've got a lot of chopping and changing in the middle, it just becomes so difficult to get that stability that you need. And yeah, I think if you could get Van Dijk back before the end of the season, I mean, that could, if they're still in the Champions League at that point, you just never know, do you? But I'm sure that's what you're not hoping for, Tom, because I know you're a Blue. So yeah.
No, I'm not too bitter. I'd like to see Liverpool do well, especially my little cousin plays for them as well. I'll give him a little shout out on the podcast. Harvey Davis got on the bench last night. He's only 17, not even signed professional terms yet, so good to see him on the bench last night. But no, moving on to a Marine kind of thing, side of things, it's obviously we haven't got any football at the moment, which is a shame to see. But last game was Spurs, the one you covered, and it's been pretty much empty since then, and we've not seen any football at all. So that's why we're talking Premier League and covering all different kinds of football. But yeah, take us back to right the start. Then, how did you first get involved with Marine? I've seen the photo of when you were a mascot, age 12. Was that how you first got involved as a mascot?
Well, I think I actually started watching the team a few years before. I think that was in 1990. 95, I think, that game.
Yeah.
Against Shrewsbury. I sort of started going regularly in 92, 93 season, I think. I'd gone to a couple of games before that. I think the first game that I went to, I remember it, Bangor City at home. I think the scoreline was 1-1. And it was a cold night and can't remember too much from that game. But yeah, the 92, 93 season, they went on a big FA Trophy run and played some exotic sounding teams to me at the time, like Dagenham and Redbridge and Kettering Town and a few other teams like from other parts of the country. And obviously Marine just kept on winning in that and got to the semi-final, played Witten Albion, obviously a bit closer to home, and Witten were in the conference as it was. And I went to both games, home and away. I remember being in the away ends at Witten. There was maybe 3,000 people there. That might be an exaggeration. It seemed like that to me. The away ends at Witten was absolutely packed. You know, like it was like a proper football atmosphere when you go to a big match. You know, there was that big match anticipation. Brilliant. Absolutely loved it. And even though I was like grew up a Liverpool fan, like my dad sort of, I've never really spoken to him about it why he started taking me to Marine. I think it was like possibly a couple of things. I mean, there was even then there was the increasing cost of football. It was sort of slowly going up. You know, the post-Hillsborough years as well. Like I think, sort of taking a young kid to a football match in those years. I don't know whether it psychologically you maybe thought it's probably not the best thing to be doing. Like when we went to the Liverpool match, it was always in the paddock really rather than the car. And yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest. I mean, I sort of became, I've said this before to a few people, sort of became a glory hunting Marine fan because they were doing so well. Like that's what lures you in, isn't it? I mean, I know in recent years I've got like sort of admiration for people who've been lured into non-league football without the success. I mean, I was really fortunate that I went in watching Marine at a time when they were one of the best. Well, they were one of the best non-league teams in the country. I mean, as far as I was concerned, the best non-league team outside the conference in the country because they had the FA Trophy run, then they had the FA Cup run the year after that. I mean, I was at all those games, Stafford Rangers, Halifax Town. Sorry, Halifax came first and then Stafford. Crewe, Alexandria away. I went to that one. I think I must have gone to all the FA, the qualifying rounds as well. And yeah, just incredible. You know, it wasn't like going to a non-league football match because it was all about the crowd for me rather than the football. It was just like all these people inside a packed space and the energy that was created, and absolutely just loved it straight away. Just loved it being so close to the pitch as well. Like and all the players were like sort of. It's not like not like it is now where it's a much younger game. I think like sort of the average age of the Marine team must have been late 20s, 30 odd at that time, and all big, powerful men, you know, kicking shite out of each other. It was absolutely brilliant. I loved it. So yeah, and then they won the league 2 seasons on the run. Can vividly remember that day when they won the first league title. I mean, I don't know whether you know this story. A lot of Marine fans who've been going, you know, sort of for that length of time will always remember it, but some of the more recent supporters, you know, I feel sorry for them for not having had that experience, because for me it was like really illustrated how what it's like to win something, you know, like in terms of, you know, palpably be able to touch and feel part of a football team's success. It was weird. Like, you know, last day of the season, went down to the last day of the season, Marines game had finished, they'd won, waiting on the results of League Town at Bridlington, who I'd already lost. Nice, warm April day. And everybody just waited on the pitch for the sign that hopefully League could drop points. And by some miracle, he did. And just remember the celebrations afterwards, just being a bit jealous that I couldn't go and have a drink. You know, I was too young, obviously. So yeah, really lucky to have that sort of introduction to it. And then as the years passed, I mean, sadly, sort of the team fell away a bit for a few years and then came back again. Had a really great season at the back end of the 90s under Rolly Howard. You know, they close to winning the league again that season, but not quite close enough. And then that was just after that, I started getting involved in journalism at that point. And that's when the sort of relationship with the club changes a little bit, I think. You know, but yeah, absolutely brilliant, and I've got nothing but positive memories from that period in the 90s. Just a wonderful introduction to football, to non-league football, and seeing what it really means to players and people. And yeah, absolutely fantastic. I wouldn't have changed any part of that at all.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and it's just. I hope we can get back to that as well. We've got that many fans in the stadium, because no doubt we will after all the success we've had. Hopefully we can bring Marine back to those glory days, and hopefully back to the Northern Premier League soon as well. And if we were to win the league, we'd maybe be in a position to get promoted this time as well, because obviously there's been constraints with the ground in the past when we've won the league and things like that. And hopefully we'll be in a position where we will be able to work the way up. I know everyone at the club is very ambitious at the moment and want to be at a higher level, which is frustrating at the moment, obviously, with 2 seasons being curtailed, and we've been looking to get promotion, but hopefully that will happen soon enough. But yeah, you mentioned your days reporting with Rowley and things like that. I've heard a couple of stories with Rowley Howard being quite difficult. Was he what was he like to work with?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think any manager's sort of, he could be difficult at times, but all I'd say is he always picked up the phone.
Yeah.
From a journalistic point of view, even if I'd upset him, which I think I did a few times, being very young, being naive, not really necessarily knowing all the time what might upset a very experienced football manager, and being a bit gung-ho with my approach. But he could be difficult sometimes, but I think he was fair. I never thought he was unfair, really. I mean, I started because, I mean, the Crosby Herald were looking for somebody to sort of do some match reports, and I think the first one that it did was, it must have been, I think it was a game against Alfreton, and I ended up phoning in the report to the Liverpool, to the Pink Echo, and they had a copy taker who sort of listened to my version of events and then formed some sort of match report. But it seemed like a few people sort of do that job and progress. So there was like Andy Hunter, who was he was there before me. He's now at the Guardian. He was the Independent before that, and obviously I went to the Independent previously before I was at the Athletic. And there've been quite a few reporters like Andy who'd sort of made a career for themselves by going and reporting. But I think he was reporting at the club like sort of mid 90s really, and then got a job at the Daily Post, the Echo, and then moved into the national sort of circuit then. So it sort of showed me that there was some sort of route, although I wasn't really, being totally honest, I never ever thought for 1 minute I'd end up sort of doing what I'm doing, just because I never thought that I had that much talent, really. So, Rowley, I remember there's one game that always sticks out, which I've written about, so I apologise, I'm repeating myself, but they had a really difficult start one season when the FA Cup, knocked out the FA Cup, knocked out the trophy, possibly second or third to bottom in the league by the end of September, and I can't even remember what I'd written, but I probably just obviously illustrated exactly how it was. I didn't sort of gloss over the fact that they were really struggling, and it may have been his last season or his second to last season, I can't remember exactly. And I just remember we arrived at Oxford Town, and he wasn't out on the pitch. He was waiting for me in the clubhouse before the game with his assistant Roger Patience and his first team coach Dave Thompson. And I just got off. I think maybe I'd travelled from Sheffield because I studied in Sheffield, so I just arrived there and needed the toilet. So went into the gents, and I was followed by Dave Thompson, who slammed the door and gave me a bit of a dressing down, and then suddenly Rowley appeared with Roger, and they weren't happy as well. It was a proper grilling. And I can't remember sort of what they were sort of claiming, really. I was just like, well, what do you want me to write? It's like, it's not going well on the pitch. And I think that was part of the big challenge with Marine, because obviously, you develop personal relationships with people. I didn't know Rowley before I started, you know what I mean? You become sort of familiar with him, and I liked him, you know what I mean? But when you start reporting, the sort of relationships change. And I think, obviously, non-league football club, there's a lot of volunteers involved, and I think people sort of do you take things to heart? Are you ever critical? And it's a difficult sort of getting that balance between being a reporter for the paper and presenting the club for what it is, which is, you know, it's a volunteer-based football club, albeit, you know, with a manager who's paid and players who are paid. So I sort of feel, well, they're fair game, you know, for criticism if things aren't going well. So yeah, it was a tricky sort of transition, really, and it took me sort of made a lot of mistakes, probably alienated myself from people at certain times, but was always made to feel welcome, you know, on the team bus, for example. I travelled with the team to away games on occasion, you know, and I don't think I ever, I couldn't have been that bad at it, because I can't really remember any of the players being too upset with me at any point, maybe one or two, but yeah, so it was a wonderful grounding, which I, again, wouldn't change at all, because feel very fortunate that I was able to sort of do the job that I did there. The job that I did there is essentially the job that I do now. You know, it's the same process as developing relationships with people, picking up the phone to people, you know, sometimes asking them questions they might not want to answer, particularly the manager. You know, I mean, I don't think Rowley liked being asked questions by a teenager, put it that way. Which is just fair enough. I mean, what do I know about football? He'd been in the game for such a long time, and I had a probably idealistic way of the way things should be. But yeah, absolutely great times, and yeah, unfortunately, obviously, Rowley retired and then was replaced by Alvin McDonald. And I mean, I always felt that I had a good relationship with Alvin, but things towards the end of his reign turned a bit sour for a number of reasons, and I sort of, I think it was 2007. I think that was when I moved on from the Crosby Herald at that point, and I think it was the right time for me to move on, to be honest, to stop reporting on Marine, and to go and sort of experience reporting on a different football club, sort of where the more people are reading your stuff, and it was just the right time to progress, I think, at that time. So I moved on and started covering Liverpool and Everton for, well, it was sort of their in-house operation, which again was a brilliant in for me to understand how major football clubs operate, and how to sort of, it opened a lot of doors to me, to people who I just always thought would be out of reach, you know, sort of players that I idolised, managers that I respected. So yeah, it was the right time to move on, I think, at that point. But again, I just got to emphasise, I wouldn't change any elements of it. You know, even some of the dressing downs that I had, and some of the slammed phones, terminated phone conversations that I had at certain times. You know, maybe upset the chairman a few times, but just the way it is. I mean, I think you can approach it in a different way. Of course, you can sort of not see Marine in a competitive way, I suppose, because it is an on-league football club, and ultimately people, you shouldn't necessarily be there for the results, I think. But I always believe that if I reported on Marine as a sort of on a professional basis, and presented them in a professional way, that would engage people, you know, in a better way, rather than sort of getting a bit of sympathy in the local paper. I just thought sometimes it may have sounded, you know, it might have sounded too much like a charity, and that just would have turned me off. You know, you want to be treated seriously, and that's how I always approached it, you know, from day one, really. And maybe obviously because I'd been at the, you know, involved at the club, and knew a lot of people, sort of was maybe a bit too close, you know, in terms of what I wanted to see. My version of, like, sort of a football club was what a successful football club was what I'd seen 10 years before. And by the time I started reporting, obviously they weren't doing so well. So probably some personal frustrations attached to that. But as I said, I wouldn't change any of it. And it was absolutely great to sort of go and learn my trade in that environment.
Yeah, and I think that's the way the club would be want to be represented at the moment, in a professional light, because I think that's the way things are going now at the moment, and they don't want to be kind of given the sympathy. They want to be respected, and that's what you try to do, which is fantastic. It does sound like those, even the harsh experiences, kind of taught you a lot as a journalist, and set you up for the career you've had, or you're having, of course. And it's kind of, I find it crazy personally how many top journalists have, or journalists at the top level, have cut the teeth at marine. Like people like yourself, people like Andy Hunter, people like Dave Prentice as well. It seems to give writers a very good grounding for to go on to achieve big things in their careers. So how did you end up moving up from marine to these national outlets? How did that work out? Such as the Independent and the Athletic.
That's an even longer story, that one. Yeah. I mean, you're right. There are a lot of people, and I think, I just think people on Merseyside are passionate about football, and where there's passion, there's an urge to express yourself, and I think that explains why there's a lot of good writers from Merseyside who sort of prepare to get their hands dirty as well and go into marine, which is great. I always say that to anybody who asks me. I was lucky that the Crosby Herald was there at the time. It's not there now, obviously, and I rue that fact, because I think it's been a great place for a lot of journalists to go and learn what it's all about. So I always say to anybody who asks, if you've got a local paper and you don't have a reporter covering the local football team, have a go at it, because it's, you might not get paid well, if at all. For a long time I didn't get paid, but it was, I wasn't doing it for the pay. I was like sort of thinking, it's what I enjoy doing. It's hopefully going to look good on the CV at some point to someone, presumably. It took a long time for somebody to pay any attention, to be honest, but yeah, I mean, I got a job out of it, basically working for the Crosby Herald in general news. So I've been covering marine for probably about 4 or 5 years. Went through the whole rigmarole of a degree, postgraduate diploma. Had to still wait another year to get a job. I was like, come on, give us a chance. Like, finally got a job, and they sort of sent me up to Southport. Remember the first day when I was there was a first article I think I put in the Southport Visitor, was a UFO sighting, which sort of reflects the state of play, I think. And I remember sitting on a park bench on my first day thinking, God, this isn't really what I want to do. I'm going to have to sort of, I felt a long way away from where I wanted to be honest. And sort of bounced backwards and forwards between the Visitor and the Herald, as a lot of reporters did at that time. And about 6 months later, a job came up within Trinity Mirror, which for people who didn't know, it's now Reach PLC. I mean, it's sort of got a grip on Merseyside press, the only place to work really from a written perspective. And there was a job going covering Liverpool and Everton for, doing the match day magazines and programmes. And I tried to get in at the Echo, sort of with the covering Liverpool and Everton for the Echo one way or another, through work experience or whatever. And, the people ahead of me were just like, absolutely brilliant. I mean, like, I'd read Chris Bascom's stuff when he covered Liverpool, Rick George before him. Tony Barrett had just taken over from Chris. And these guys were like, had loads more experience than me, you know what I mean? And I was like, so I was a long way behind them really, and I had a lot of catching up to do. I wanted to sort of get anywhere near them really, get anywhere near those sorts of jobs. So I applied for that job despite my editor sort of railing against it, to be honest. She was like very very unsupportive, and I ended up getting the job anyway. I think it was partly because it was cheap labour. But it was great, obviously, as I said, sort of loads of ins, great in with both clubs. But after a couple of years, I sort of realised this isn't really what I want to do long term. I wanted to go and do what I did for Marine, or covering Marine, but doing it for the paper. So again, got the knockback from the Liverpool Echo job for covering Liverpool. Same with Everton. I was a bit like, obviously gutted about that really. And then decided to sort of write to a lot of the national newspapers and say, is there any chance of doing some sort of freelance reporting, going to, I'll do any matches, whatever you want, you know what I mean, whilst, occupying my full-time job. So wrote to all of them. The only one who came back was the Telegraph of all the newspapers, and ended up for sort of 3 or 4 years, really, sort of going up and down the motorway to all the games that none of the full-time reporters wanted to do, really. And again, that was absolutely brilliant experience because you're learning to deal with sort of deadline pressure, which is a totally different experience and really sharpens up your writing a lot. You know, deadline pressure, full-time match reports, rewrite an hour later, interviewing all the managers, getting many quotes for the players as you can. Absolutely loved all that again. But I sort of reached the point again where I was a bit like, I was doing that whilst also writing a few books to try and give me a bit of the pay rise that I never got, I suppose. That's the best way of putting it. And reached a point where I'd accrued enough experience and had enough contacts in the game to think I can go and do this, you know, like sort of I might be able to go out on my own. And I was very, very close to getting a full-time job at the Independent, but then the editor sadly got sacked. The new editor had his own people that he wanted to bring in, so I had to wait again, and that was really frustrating. And then ended up basically going to work for the Independent about a year, 18 months later, because the editor who came in ended up getting the sack as well because he did such a bad job, and ended up getting that sort of role one way or another, whilst taking on a few other jobs to sort of tide me over financially. So I was sort of the Independence man in the Northwest, if you like, on a retainer basis. That's the best way of sort of describing it, which was good because it allowed a lot of freedoms around other jobs. And so that's how I got into the Independent, and they wanted me to cover Liverpool, Everton, any news stories. I mean, the direction was always try and be different, to try and separate yourself from the rest of the pack. So, as I said, I had my own contacts, try to build my own like sort of stories, do things a little bit differently if possible, and was there for the best part of 4 or 5 years, really, and have some, you know, brilliant times. Really fortunate, really, because I made the decision to go there just before Jurgen Klopp became the Liverpool manager, and obviously it coincided with sort of Liverpool's rise to relevance again. So, you know, obviously getting involved in Champions League finals coverage, you know, all the European matches home and away, just brilliant, you know, so sort of what you'd aim to do. Just just it was a dream, really. And I mean the Athletic came along in sort of interesting circumstances, because I remember I was in Barcelona for the 3-0, you know, in the Champions League semi-final first leg, and found out that my editor, Ed Mallion, was leaving, and I was like, oh my God, this isn't good news, because, you know, everybody's got, as I said to you before, you know, everybody's got sort of the favourites, if you like, and sort of people you can trust. And I thought, if another editor comes in, what if he doesn't want me, might want somebody else? And, you know, Liverpool got absolutely trounced. Well, they played really well, I thought, in the new camp, and somehow they got Messi, didn't they? Like, just totally done by him. It was an incredible performance. And came home just wondering what the hell was going to go on. But fortunately, I had a phone call off Ed, who sort of said, just sit tight, I've got something going down. And I was like, this sounds a bit like sort of exciting. And turned out the Athletic were going to launch that summer, and he was part of the recruitment drive and wanted me to be a part of it. And I was just like, he's right, just get me involved straight away. The way he described it, you know, sort of first time in 15 years in journalism where somebody was actually putting money into it, recruiting loads of people that I admired, you know, within the industry, loads of people that I liked as well, you know, a lot of journalists that get on quite well with, to be honest. And it's not always an industry where you build up sort of rapport with people, because you are competing, you know what I mean? It's quite a weird environment, but a lot of the people that they employees were people that I liked as well. So, and the job description was different. It was like not so much match focused. It was more sort of, I did realise in that sort of last weeks of that season that the treadmill of doing sort of match meant that I wasn't really doing much journalism, in the sense that, like, okay, match reporting is very important and an art, as far as I'm concerned, one of the hardest things you can do, but ultimately, you know, that it's just your take on something that everybody's already seen. I see it as journalism is the responsibility to tell people what they haven't seen and what they don't know.
Yeah.
And that this job has allowed me to sort of to try and do that a little bit more, I think.
Definitely, it's the depth you can get in the Athletic interviews. It's kind of it's unparalleled, really, in other journalism. In my opinion, personally, you can say what you want, whereas in other forms of journalism, especially online at the moment, you're kind of restricted to one sentence, punchy paragraphs kind of thing. And I think that's probably how my match reports with Marine started, and then it's when you get some depth to it going is when you get the actual quality journalism, which is what you're producing now at the Athletic. And it's fantastic to hear the story of how you worked your way all the way up from Marine to the Athletic. And it's absolutely it's a fantastic story that I thought everyone should definitely hear. So that's why I wanted you to tell it. And of course, it brought you on to covering the Spurs game as well, full circle, coming back to Marine. What was that like when you first learned that you were going to be coming back to Marine and as part of the Athletic?
Well, I mean, I still go to a fair number of games. I suppose my relationship with the club lapsed quite a bit, really, for 10 years, really. My dad would still go quite a lot. He's moved away from it a little bit. I think it's partly, being totally honest, the team hasn't been doing well, and I think not winning many home games, and he wasn't getting a great deal out of it. I can understand the way he feels, because he's got an even bigger attachment to the club than me, I think. So, yeah, I mean, as soon as the draw was made, I mean, I had people from America getting in touch with me within minutes, saying, we saw you wrote that thing about Marine, because I was written about Marine in the first round. Ahead of the first round game against Colchester, about roughly some of the stories that I've just told you, I suppose. Yeah. And they noticed that, and he was just like, can you sort of maybe see whether you'd want to do any sponsorship? So I met with James Leary, and initially they were talking about a few things, the front of shirt, back of shirt, all sorts of options on the table. And obviously part of that was to have the access on that week, we'd be able to tell the inside story, if you like. And I mean, to be honest, I mean, I'd already spoken to Neil Young, and I know Neil pretty well now. Really like him. Great to sort of chat to, and I think he's Marine in brilliant hands with him. And I'd already pretty much convinced him to do that anyway, really. So it probably, I think with a bit of luck, it would have happened anyway without the sponsorship. But it did obviously help that we were doing the back of the shirt sponsors, which I think it worked out really well in the end, because you tend to see the back of the shirts more in the games, don't you? As much as the front of the shirts, really. So I know the people like in America who sort of deal with all that sort of thing, and in London as well. We're delighted with the coverage that they got. But yeah, I mean, it was a strange experience, really, because I mean, I hadn't obviously in the year of the pandemic, I hadn't really spent too much time out seeing people, and it was nice that be face-to-face contact with people and learning a bit more about them. I think it's, as we discussed just before we started the podcast, how important that is, and rather than doing stuff on the phone all the time. And it was a really, really brilliant week. I mean, Neil couldn't have been any more helpful. I mean, trusted me with everything, really. I mean, I knew about Marine's tactical plan on the Tuesday, what they were going to try and do. I knew what, pretty much the lot, really. Obviously, I was never going to tell anybody what was going on, but he was obviously trying his best to get Marine set up in a way that would make it as difficult as possible for Tottenham, with the hope that they just get lucky on the day, obviously. But they did go with a plan. It's not as simple as to say they just turned up and sort of hope for the best. The level of detail that he gave to the players was incredible, and as good as you will see at any professional outfit, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I've done these sort of behind the scenes things before, with various other clubs, and I've loved them. Absolutely love them. I love sort of that sort of, as I said, that sort of contact with people and learning more about people, particularly when they're under pressure in those pressure moments. Because I ideally wanted to get into the dressing room. That was what I was hoping to do. But because of the protocols around COVID, I wasn't able to do that, which is understandable. But every other moment I was with the team. So was there on the Tuesday, the first session of the week on the Tuesday. Very cold night over at Vauxhall Motors, and good. It was a really insightful session, and he really sort of laid out what he was planning to do. But I did sense on that day there was a lot of players were a bit nervous, I think, because of the COVID situation, because I don't think they could get excited about the game, because if they failed the test, that was them out. Marine, it was absolute miracle that all the players, staff, everyone involved, having had to go to work or whatever, working on building sites. James Barrigan obviously working as a BIM, that nobody picked anything up. Just incredible, and shows you just how focused the players were and how desperate they were to play.
Yeah.
So yeah, didn't go to the training session. I met with Neil on the Wednesday again to talk through things, and didn't go on the Thursday. But then things really ramped up on the Saturday after the COVID tests all came through on the Friday. So I was sort of writing up what I'd seen in the course of the week, so we could get the report out as quickly as possible, the following day after the game. On the Saturday, I went to the training session up at Liverpool's academy, and it was a lot more relaxed that day. You could sense it. The players were relieved that they were able to play. And yeah, spent the evening with them. I know obviously you were there, Tom, and sort of spoke again at length with a lot of the players about their sort of emotions around the game and some of their histories. I mean, I know Kenny Strickland's been at Marine for a long time, but he was telling me some great stories about his time at Chelsea. You know what I mean? I think he was played for Man United's youth team, played for Chelsea. Some of the things that he's seen, some of the players that he's sort of come into contact with, just incredible. And I mean, he only formed a small part of the piece. I wish I could have written a bit more, but each player had a story to tell in some way, and I just love that. I just love being around like sort of people who are sort of under that pressure, of trying to deliver a result. Obviously there was a chance Marine could get thoroughly and utterly tonked and embarrassed on that day, and that the players must have been thinking about that. I don't want to be embarrassed on national TV, but as far as I was concerned, I mean, on the day, I mean, we that was when you could see the nerves creeping in a little bit. You could sense the tension in the hours before the game. Managed to get on the team bus, incredible drive up College Road, and it sort of annoyed me really that the way a lot of, I mean, there's obviously people on the street, but as far as I could tell, everyone was taking as much precaution as they could, all face masks up. The crowds weren't as congested as it looked. There was a lot of space between people at times, and obviously it became a little bit of a discussion point. But it was sort of laced with sadness, the actual game. I've got to be honest, like the game is the bit that I enjoyed the least in some ways, because obviously being so close to the pitch was great. I went down the touchline under the terrace, and what I loved about that was being able to see, the Tottenham players and the Marine players doing their absolute best to stop them. You just realise how physically big these players are, and how quick they are. I mean, obviously I've seen a lot of Premier League football over the years, but that's Premier League footballers against Premier League footballers, and sometimes sort of cancels each other out, and you don't quite appreciate just how talented these players are, who train every day, peak physical condition. And for 20, 25 minutes, Marine held them. It was just only after the first goal, really, wasn't it? I think that was like, you could feel the energy sucked out the team a little bit at that point. But the sadness for me was that there weren't at least 300 or 400 people inside the grounds, because, as we know, when you sort of get 300 or 400 people at Marine, it feels like there's 3,000 or 4,000, doesn't it? And I think that would have created a really great atmosphere, even that small number of people. And I think it would have put a little bit more pressure on Tottenham as well on the day, because they were able to pop it about a little bit, and without having somebody on the touchline sort of winding them up. And I mean, I must confess, like, I was sometimes shouting at some of the Tottenham players, trying to like sort of wind them up a little bit. But when you're like sort of, a one-man band, it doesn't quite have the same impact. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. I mean, I thought Marine did fantastically, really. I know obviously Tottenham sort of eased off in the second half, but You'll forever be the question whenever I go around and speak to people about it. People ask me the question about it. What if only that Neil Kenji goal would have gone in? It's just one of those if only moments, isn't it? Time seemed to stand still inside the ground, and I'm sure it is on TV as well. It was only the next day I managed to watch everything back on TV, and must say I thought the BBC coverage of it was absolutely fantastic. They really thought, sort of treated the game with a lot of respect, and it was interesting because obviously Neil was telling me about all the phone calls that he'd had that week, and he said that Ian Wright, had just phoned him up. A lot of people phone him up to try and get the inside track on Marine and find out sort of about the players. What should I know about the players? Well, Ian Wright just phoned him up just to say, good luck. Like, I love non-league football. That's where he started out. Obviously he's an Arsenal man, isn't he? So he wanted Tottenham to lose, but just to G him up really, and just a nice touch, I thought. You know what I mean? It didn't have to do that. Yeah. So yeah, just a shame that he couldn't have scored one goal. But even if I just think, without the crowd, you don't have the impact of the feeling of that goal, do you? I think. Yeah. So yeah, shame really. But then I think the greatest shame really, because it is a story that sort of late. I came home that night tinged with a bit of sadness really. That it was like sort of. It was all over, and there was like sort of a vast emptiness to sort of look forward to, really, because there was no football coming afterwards. It's a shame that Marine haven't been able to sort of go and capitalise on sort of the interest in the club and get some more fans coming regularly. I've just got to say, I don't know. I think that the club now is in a position where having watched how Neil operates, they have to trust him. That they have, when he says something, they have to listen to him. I understand. The club's run by sort of committee and that they've been there for a long time. But I think he's proven himself now that he's capable of delivering special things, really. And I think that they've got a great man in charge, really great fella, loves football. Desperately wants to do well for Marine and put them roughly back where they could be and where I think that they should be. I just think that they've got to, I'm not saying this isn't financially, it's just they've got to listen to him and let him push the club in the same way that Rowley did in the old, 25 years ago. He was the club, wasn't he? So for me, having watched him operate at close quarters, they're really, really lucky to have him.
They are, yeah. Definitely. And even when the club were relegated as well, it was brilliant to see Neil stick with the club, because we all trusted throughout the relegation. We all trusted in how good of a manager Neil was and Neil is now, and I'm sure we've got the full trust of the club. And I do think the club is destined for great things now. We've got a manager who arguably is levels above his league that we're in at the moment, and a lot of players who are, to be honest, levels above the league as well, and now the financial backing as well from the wonderful support that we got across the footballing world. Hopefully we can push on as a club and reach those levels that a lot of the people around the club aspire to. So I know I'd like to think it's a club moving in the right direction, definitely. But yeah, giving us plenty of fantastic answers there, so thanks for that. But what I would like to delve into as well, of course, you said about I know a lot of us have read your article from the day after the game as well, but you said there were stories that you weren't able to get into the piece as well, those personal stories such as Kenny's as well. So can you tell us some of the stories that didn't quite make it into the piece? I know in the piece, just for people who hadn't read it, there's things like Kenny's, obviously, as we mentioned, his past with the academies. Carlo Ancelotti gave him his chance to train with the first team at Chelsea. So yeah, what were some of those stories that we couldn't quite get in the piece?
Just trying to think now. It's been so relentless, like in the last few months since. I felt a bit bad because obviously the players are really accommodating, and despite having unlimited space, you can't include everybody into it. So I was interested to hear from Josh Hamami, who basically, obviously he's become the star player, really. Is it fair to say that now? I don't watch Marine enough to make that claim. You're hopefully in the best position to say that, but he's obviously had a great season, hasn't he? He scored a lot of goals, set pieces. When I watch him, he just always seems to have time on the ball, which you don't often see in non-league football. I think he's a really talented lad, and it wasn't like stories. I say it's just the sort of, he was telling me about how lengths that Neil had gone to sort of convince him to come and join Marine. I mean, he lives in Oldham. It's you know, a big undertaking to come to travel every couple of days from Oldham to Merseyside for the game of football. You know, particularly when I think he's got aspirations of playing a lot higher. I think again it goes back to what I was saying. I think that they're lucky to have Neil Young because he's able to attract that sort of playing and convince him. You know that he is the right manager for him. I know when Neil was the manager of Chester, one of the players who he did really well with was Anthony Sarcevic, who now plays for Bolton's, had a really good career in the Football League. And I think what Neil was trying to explain was, you know, you could have that, you know, if you come with me. You know, you're saying similar sort of player, very talented. But, you know, he's obviously had a really good season. You know, Kenny, I mentioned Kenny before. I mean, he was telling me all about Chelsea, how, you know, Joe Cole was absolutely brilliant with him. I don't know whether that made it into the piece, but yeah, just saying about, he did once, I think there was one session when he was asked to train with the first team to fill in for Ancelotti, because Ancelotti was the manager. Fill in because I think John Terry was injured, if I remember correctly. So he was playing alongside, maybe it was Carvalho, and in another session he scored a goal in front of Joe Cole, who was just wowed by this goal, and ended up finding out that Joe Cole actually knew Skem, where obviously he's from, because there was a lad who he played for England with called Ian Armstrong, who was from Skem, and he's actually been to Skem, which was a bit of a surreal thought about when you think about it. But so there's those two things. I'm just trying to think on my feet a little bit now. I mean, there was a lot of, sometimes when you're writing a piece, you can't include everything. I mean, to make me laugh, one of the comments under the piece that I never mentioned, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before, that, like, sort of, I think when you're reporting on a club and everybody's doing something out of the goodness of the heart and you know, giving up the time. For example, I never mentioned the fact that the Marine they'd had their own song out for the game. I didn't put it in the piece. And, like, you know, one of the people in the comments section was like, I can't believe you haven't mentioned this fact. And I was like, well, I didn't really, I mean, as great as it is, don't get me wrong, yeah, but it wasn't really the focus of the article. I'm trying to tell, again, goes back to what I was saying, tell people stuff that they don't know. So even though you've got, like, sort of unlimited space, as we do in the Athletic, you still got to sort of keep it sharp as you can. You can't detour too much, because it's got to be, if you're writing something long, it's all got to peg together for the reader and make it understandable. So there was a lot of players who I spoke to, and I didn't get their sort of stories into it. I would have liked to write a little bit more about Niall Cummins, you know, who's obviously the captain and a key player. He gave me a great interview, but it didn't quite connect on the themes that I was sort of trying to extract in the piece. But yeah, I mean, great group of lads. You know, he's clearly, the manager's clearly got a group of players there who not just good footballers, but nice people as well. You know, decent people who desperate to do well, very humble as well. You know, very, very humble. Players who, you know, sort of accept that, you know, the sort of the standard of football where they're at, but that doesn't allow them. That doesn't mean that they're not sort of you know, that they're not driven. Well, obviously the undertaking of playing football for Marine is incredible. You know, you've got to be driven to play non-league football because of the level of commitments. You know, I'm never failed to be impressed by players who do that, because, you know, you're giving up so much time for relatively little money, you know, relatively speaking. So yeah, it was a great week. I'm just trying to think on my feet of stories that I was given, but it feels like an eternity ago, because, as I say, work's just been pretty unrelenting in the period since. You know, I was sort of the next morning after filing that piece on Marine, I was on to something else. But yeah, sorry for not sort of coming up with a better answer.
Oh no, don't worry. That's some great stories anyway, and there was some great stories in the article as well. So I'd definitely point people that way if you do have a athletic subscription, and if you don't, then it's definitely worth getting one for some of Simon's work. And moving back to the club, obviously we saw in the lead up to the game there was some incredible kindness from the footballing world, as I've mentioned. 32,202 people bought virtual tickets, and what that's going to do for the club going forward is absolutely phenomenal. So How do you think the club can benefit from that going forward? And what do you think, having experienced it so closely, all these players who do have aspirations of making it professionally, even in the 8th tier at the moment, what do you think the future holds for Marine following all that?
Well, I mean, in my view, I mean, I think the club is 2 levels below where it could realistically be.
Yeah.
That's my view. I think the National League now is very different league to the conference as it was maybe 15, 20 years ago. Huge amounts of money washing about, and there's a huge amount of money washing about in the National League as well. But there are teams in that league who manage to stay competitive. And I don't see why Marine, with the sort of the funding behind them now, couldn't become one of those teams really. And I just think that it was incredible to see, the sort of, particularly the generosity from the Tottenham fans. I was particularly blown away by that. But in some ways I wasn't surprised as well. I mean, I've got to say, all my encounters with Tottenham supporters over the years have always been excellent. I think about the Champions League final in Madrid. They were absolutely brilliant that weekend. It was a party. It never really was reflected in the British press. It was a party between 2 sets of English supporters, really, in Madrid, which the sort of goodwill between the 2 sets of fans. There was no anti-Scouse stuff ever. None of that. And you never really hear it when Tottenham play Everton or Liverpool. So, I was really impressed. But when I thought about it, I wasn't actually that surprised because, I think they've got a good fan base who understand football. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously given the club a major boost they never expected in the on that side of it. But then the e-ticket thing, I mean, whoever came up with that idea at the club should have the name inscribed above the clubhouse, I think, because that's obviously a game changer for Marine, really, isn't it, over the next few years. So as I said a couple of answers ago, I just think that you've got a great manager there now, Neil Young, who knows exactly what he's doing. He knows the club better, obviously, than he did when he first came in. He's really, as far as I'm concerned, could be managing the National League easy. He's way below where he should be at in terms of what he offers the players and the way he offers it as well. It's like, what really impressed me was he was able to explain quite complex things in a simple way. Yeah. Like I learned a lot of stuff about football that week that I didn't know. Not because I don't. I mean, I'm not saying I'm certainly not the oracle of football. I don't know much about tactics and stuff. It's all a bit beyond me. But I was just really impressed the way he was able to do that. With the players, and I just hope that they know exactly what they've got on their hands. And I know obviously they've given him a long-term contract, which is great. But he's got to be the one that drives it now. I think you've got to allow him to express himself and have his say and trust him when he says something. I think so. I would expect Marine have got to get out this league first. I would be pretty confident that they will soon enough because they were close enough over the last certainly the season before, not last season, the season before. We can't really read too much into this season, but they were at the top end of that league. I think they probably would have just missed out on promotion that 2019-20 season. They were just a bit too far behind, but now with the money that they've got, they should be competitive enough to be able to get 1 or 2 extra players. It's the top end. I mean, it's always goals, isn't it? That sort of. I think they've got the defence that can win them league. They've got a strong defence, great goalkeeper. I think all the team, starting 11, fantastic. But I suppose what Neil Young will be looking for is more goals now. I know Niall Cummins has been absolutely brilliant for Marine, but he needs support as well. He needs help, doesn't he? I think. Any striker would admit that. So it's the strikers that tend to be at a premium, and I would hope that Marine will be able to attract somebody to support Niall and hopefully score the goals that give them the edge, in those tight games against the teams that are around them, competing at the top. So yeah, I would expect that to happen. I would hope that they'd be competitive in the league above because, that league's a very different league. I noticed that there's physically the league that they're in at the moment is not quite as demanding in terms of the size of the players and the style of football it's a lot more physical and a lot more direct in the league above, I think. So they're going to have to, different challenges for different seasons. But I would expect if they do give the manager the sort of the trust and the backing that is needed, that he'll take them in the direction that they should be in. They should be heading in. But it's never easy, is it, football? I mean, it's going to be really interesting, I think, in the post-pandemic world, because Marine will be in a very sort of clinically sad way. Marine are going to be in a great position at a time when a lot of clubs won't be. So, there'll be a lot of clubs probably looking to streamline and probably pay a bit less. Marine have actually suddenly come into money just at that time. So they're probably fortunate in some ways. And it's in some ways, personally, I sort of think it goes against non-league football. That's always the team. People talk about non-league football as being the alternative, the antidote to the money game in the Football League and the Premier League. But the sad reality is, often the teams in non-league with the most money end up winning the leagues and making the most progress.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will see. But I'll be pretty confident the next couple of seasons should give you, you're a Marine fan. I don't think that it's going to be as it has been for a number of years over the last decade, where Marine just haven't met the expectation. I'd be confident if they give them the backing that's needed, they'll get to where they want to be.
Let's hope so. Definitely, I do think we could benefit from a new striker. Definitely, someone like a Motore on a permanent deal. He was obviously on loan this season and was so excellent. Some of the difference to provide Niall Cummins with an alternative and someone who can help him out a little bit, as you say. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. So thanks for all your answers. Very very in depth and extensive, and it's been an absolute pleasure delving into all things Marine with you all before the match. So thanks a lot for coming on with us. I won't keep you too much longer because I think we started in daylight and we're now.
Yeah, it's got dark now.
It's black. You can barely see you. It's gone pitch black, hasn't it?
Yeah. But yeah. You can probably see me red face now. That's it.
You just about see it. It's like a spotlight on you from below or something. But no, thanks a lot for coming on. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And now it was great to have that evening in the team hotel and have a good chat with you as well. And beforehand, and now we'll definitely keep in touch in the future. So as I say, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Tom. No problem. Not a problem.
Yeah, it's been great, and thanks a lot for listening as well. Thanks a lot for those who've tuned in, whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you're listening on Spotify. Please give us a subscribe and make sure you listen to the other episodes as well if you haven't already, and make sure you join us next time on the Marine FC official podcast.